When poetry comes to me, I feel like a bridge between what was and what will be, between the oneness and fragmented society. It comes quietly. When I sit and listen to the voice beyond my voice. In writing, I make a choice to see us. Here, these words are a ceremony, an induction to your sovereignty, a pathway to the solidarity that moves us forward.
Hi, I'm Zack Newmark. This is Dam Yankee. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube for all the best interviews with the coolest performers and artists based here in the Netherlands and those traveling through the country, like Julia Beth Harris, a wordsmith, graphic designer, fashion designer, but now more often working as a performer and poet here in Amsterdam, her home of the past 14 years. She's originally from Cape Town, and her written work delves deep into cultural similarities, cultural differences, family, religion, and communities. You can see her staged poetry show, Where the Clouds Gather, during the Spirit of Amsterdam Festival towards the end of November, and we are very lucky to have her here with us today. Julia Beth Harris, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm really interested because, working as a poet and performer is something many people aspire to at some stage in their lives, especially those who are more enjoying of literature. How is it that you actually accomplished that feat of becoming a working poet?
Yeah, the answer to that question is really organically. I couldn't have planned my path, but I think what intention was behind this result is following my gut, moment to moment, day to day, month by month, and year by year. And that's what led me to becoming a working poet. When I arrived in the Netherlands in 2011, as an au pair, a nanny, in the Dutch countryside, I didn't know that I would stay. I didn't know that I was immigrating, and I certainly didn't foresee that I would become a poet. But I think the perspective that truly putting down roots in another place when you are from the other side of the world, the perspective that gives you, and I think probably you can relate as well, is naturally poetry. And I think I've been journaling since I was a teenager. Like, that's always been a craft. And with time and with this perspective of like being home in two places, the poetry naturally developed. And when I started to share that on my social media, it's the one thing, despite everything else that I've studied or produced or put out there, that's the thing that resonated with people the most and made the most impact. So I was like, oh, well, there's something here. And following that led me to now, 4 or 5 years later, being a working poet. And it just feels like the path has led me here.
Because you said you came here as an au pair.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when you were in your mid-20s.
That's right.
Why here? Like, why did you come to the Netherlands in the first place?
Like I was mentioning earlier, somebody once asked me, did I choose Amsterdam or did Amsterdam choose me? And it really felt like when the moment that question was asked, like Amsterdam chose me. And why the Netherlands? It's funny, when I applied to be an au pair, the agency that I applied at, they had 3 options, and it seemed so random that these would be the options. You could either go and do, at that time, you could go to Israel to a kibbutz and offer 6-month relief work, or you could be an au pair in either the US or you could be an au pair in the Netherlands. And to me at the time, the Netherlands, despite what I now know about our shared history, felt like the most foreign because, it just felt like I didn't know much about it. The history wasn't really top of mind for me. I had a very superficial understanding of what Amsterdam would be. I thought, oh, cheese and clogs, let's go. Not knowing that I probably have ancestors from here, like, the way in the context of the history. So when I ended up here, it was very much out of adventure. And I didn't land in Amsterdam immediately. I landed in Geldermalsen in the Dutch countryside, right in the middle of the country. And being a city girl from Cape Town, it was quite a culture shock.
Did you know that that's where you were going to be going to, or did you get here and then that's kind of where you got placed?
I knew that was where I was going to, but I didn't realize just how different from everything that I knew as a city person the Dutch countryside would be. I mean, it was like, it was flat, green plains, mist and cows and silence. I think that was the most jarring for me for somebody from the city was the silence. I wasn't prepared for that.
Did you ever get used to it?
Well, actually, just in this, now that you're asking, this silence became one of the tools that enabled me to be a poet. I didn't realize that silence was polishing me actually into being able to listen to the deeper voices, which is where poetry comes from, at least for me. So it was all very purposeful, almost like being piloted by something else, like, to end up here, to be chosen by Amsterdam, to end up staying here, and to encounter the silence that handed me my craft.
Is that something, I will say Amsterdam, as far as, cities go, is a fairly quiet city in a lot of ways.
True.
Certainly compared to where I'm from, in Chicago, and I assume also where you're from as well.
Absolutely. The volume is lower relatively to other cities. You're right, yeah.
But that said, do you have to take retreat times or take time outside of the city to be able to actually sit and focus on your work?
Increasingly, yes. Increasingly, I find myself in having to produce a poetry on demand now, for being commissioned to write poetry, that I need to find the silence somewhere. And if I do not get to the countryside, or I do not have access to a farmhouse or something like that, then I find a lot of space can be accessed via my meditation practice that I have now. Like that is something that really helps me find pockets of silence inside myself. And that can be accessed from anywhere. What I also find really does help is taking train journeys to the Dutch coast. Like, for example, I discovered in writing Where the Clouds Gather, a trip to Petten, close to Zeeland, really did a lot for me. Also, just the act of traveling, being on the train, seeing landscapes go by, arriving at a really flat landscape, which is really elemental in terms of representing water, air, all the elements that is there, that really cultivates poetry and makes space inside me for words to come through, and for other voices, which is not my city identity, because, I'm still that girl too. It's just the poetry really comes from putting that identity to rest and making space for something else to speak. And flat landscapes really help with that, which is fortuitous that I'm in the Netherlands. I'm like, okay, this can justify why I was taken away from Table Mountain and the ocean and the paradise of Cape Town.
But you that is something that you write about quite a bit also, is your connection to the water as well. Cape Town obviously being a point where water comes in from one side and comes in from the other side. And when you talk about going to the Dutch coast, in this case in Zeeland, in the far southwest of the country, not the easiest train journey either, because you have to kind of go through a circuitous route to actually get there
True,
because of the
actually.
shape of the country.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to that water, do you feel the same connection to, say, the rough North Sea as you do to the churning? I think you described the seaside as being boiling and churning, something in Cape Town in one of your poems. But do you still feel that
Right.
connection?
Absolutely. I mean, the ocean is the ocean, and yeah, thank you for the question. Um, when I arrive at the sea, and especially if the waves are dramatic, because Cape Town is along the area where the Atlantic coast runs along. And that's a cold ocean. So even when all the pictures on the tourist brochures of Cape Town looks very sunny and everyone's in bikinis and it's just hot, 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 one dip of your toe in the water will show you that it's actually quite freezing. And yeah, so that's what I'm used to. I'm used to that when you go to the ocean and you put your feet in it, it grabs you by the ankles and it makes a statement. It's like, boom, you're mine. That's how I feel when I go home and I step foot back on Camps Bay Beach or whatever it is. So the ocean is really something that speaks also with its temperature. And similarly, when I went to the North Sea, and the ocean is also something that you're not negotiating or interacting with only from a place of comfort and pleasure. It's also quite cold and dramatic and rough, the North Sea. So I get that same feeling of being appealed to, being spoken to, like, being engaged with and compelled to do something and feel something and share that. So yes, there's definitely a connection. When I see the seas here, it makes me feel at home.
I found one of your pieces of writing. There's something that I really related to quite a bit, is because I've lived here also almost just a little bit longer than you, almost 20 years.
Wow.
And very oddly and at very random moments, sometimes, there's still a feeling of homesickness towards Chicago, despite very
Of
much
course.
choosing this as my place where I'm living. I didn't really wind up here by, I wasn't transferred out here for work. I
Yeah.
wasn't, I wasn't moved out here. I made the decision, and
Yeah.
I made the decision, to stay. Still, after 20 years, for whatever reason, I still will go through waves where I feel more sort of, longing for Chicago in
Yeah.
some ways. And you have also written about that same thing recently, I think, but
Mm-hmm.
written about how, you also have this strange connection towards Cape Town and this homesickness that you feel also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the key word there is really longing. Like, it's this, um, it's like a heart transplant, from one soil to another. And whether or not you take to the new soil or your heart grows roots in this new country has really got to do with in my experience with, is in conversation with this longing for the other place. If you are able to sort of detach and find a sense of belonging in the new place, then and I'm not sure how to even describe it, and I think that is characteristic of my experience here. It's this intangible, dislocated sense of belonging when you choose to put down roots in another soil. Like, a part of your identity is still, part of your inspiration, part of your origin story is still in the other land, even though there's many new chapters here now. But I found that this longing has been a key ingredient to creating the poetry that resonates with people. Because, and I've recently been to the Phoenix Immigration Museum in Rotterdam. And it's all about the story of immigration and how since Moses, since Jesus, uh, since colonialism, since even Queen Maxima, humans have been moving. And the emotional core of humanity is therefore in being moved also around the globe. And this is why the poem is the poetic show that I have is called Where the Clouds Gather, because humanity also moves in tides across the globe, like clouds move across the planet. And this movement creates that sense of dislocation, but also longing for what was. And it can be very productive for your sense of humanity where you are. And that's where the poetry of Where the Clouds Gather comes from. It's this intangible sort of dislocated sense of belonging that informs it.
Is there something that happens or something that triggers, that feeling of homesickness for you?
Yeah, food.
Totally.
Snacks. And the absence of a proper curry in the way that I understand it from home. I mean, that definitely triggers a sense of longing. It's like, just everything that you've known from before. So it's in food. It's in dance culture as well. Like in South Africa, song and dance is quite ubiquitous. Like, I don't know if you've ever visited, but it's really part of nationalities have identities, and it's a national value in South Africa, and which has probably got to do with the degree to which people have suffered, as they have to the same degree the capacity for making joy in the everyday mundane moments. And so life is very dramatic in South Africa. There's high highs and low lows. And when I came to the Netherlands, the flat expanses, the quiet, the restfulness, that triggered a sense of longing in me for just the variation in experience and emotional electricity that is in South Africa. But there's purpose to the contrast of those two experiences as well. Like, it's the contrast that triggers the longing, and this is productive because it gives perspective. And yeah.
When you go back to South Africa, what's the longest period of time that you've been back there since you've moved here?
What a good question. I was there in 2018 for about 13 months, just over a year.
Was there a point where the reverse happened, where you started to have a sense of, longing and, wanting to just get back to Amsterdam?
Absolutely. Like when nothing was on time. It was deeply frustrating. I wanted to hop on a plane, turn back and say, develop. Which is rude and cheeky, and there are reasons for this lack of development, of course. But in the experience of being back in the drama and the highs and lows of Cape Town, it's quite an intense place, which is also how it creeps into the heart. I'm not sure how it is in Chicago. I'd love to visit one day, but it also seems like a high energy place. And
very much.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps you can relate to the contrast of this electricity in the air and never knowing what to expect on a day. Anything can happen, just walking down the street, also the contrast in South Africa of poverty and riches. And, seeing that together in close proximity on the streets, that just does something to you when you see that, someone clicking by in Manolo Blahniks and then a barefoot street child walking the same street. That just does something to you, that contrast. And when you're in the Netherlands, it's not that those contrasts don't exist. It's just in plain sight, it's not so visible. It's more homogenized. Things are, if this is the graph of Cape Town, then the Netherlands is this. There are highs and there are lows, but neither is too dramatic in your experience. And this calm is also a gift. It's also a part of the freedoms that you can enjoy in the Netherlands here. So I think when I'm in Cape Town and looking back at the Netherlands, I do miss it. And when I arrive back at Schiphol, I'm also happy to be home. That is a feeling that I've really noticed also in myself, that when it touches down in Schiphol, I'm also breathing a sigh of like relief and release, because I can leave something behind, and that's also a privilege to be able to look forward to something unexpected and to let that transform you.
After I'd lived out here for a number of years, I started noticing more and more when I go back to the States that so much of life there, or I don't know if this is a totally fair characterization or if this is just kind of how I feel today, but I just observe conflict so much more frequently that, there's so much more that's considered an affront, or so much more that's considered an act of disrespect, or, my way is the right way, or, and there's no room for your way. And, I think going back, I also have felt over time that the US has gotten angrier, just sort of generally angrier. People say that it's because, that it's more divisiveness or 24-hour cable news or whatever it is. That's kind of the sense of relief that I feel when I come back here, that there's something about coming back to a culture of compromise, or, a culture of, okay, take it easy. That I also kind of find, rewarding.
Yeah, a culture that bends before it breaks. Like there's a pliability in Dutch culture, and a tolerance, which is the sort of part of its brand, which it's also important to say is not integration. Tolerance is not integration. But that tolerance of difference, I think, is also what characterizes, enables it to be a place where we can stay. It's very like the Netherlands is a place from which many people have left, from colonial times to now, when people are taking to now the times of digital nomads.
Right.
It's a place to leave from, but it's also very much a place which has been protected so that it's a place to stay. It's possible to be home here for people of many different walks of life. And this ability to allow things, I think, is one of the big ingredients of this ability to welcome people.
I think sometimes when people move here, they also don't realize that tolerance doesn't mean the same thing as acceptance.
It's not the same.
Because it's really not the same, and people here will let you know that it's not the same.
For sure, especially after a number of years, right, of staying here. You're like, it's also probably why why you created this platform, to make space for the voices you wanted to, that you missed in the mainstream.
Sure. Yeah. No, definitely. And it's also, so interesting to speak with performers as well, because then you also get, an opportunity to talk to people about the cultural differences that they experience on stage as well. And I'm wondering for you, because you developed your career here.
True.
And you developed your career on when you perform on stage, it was developed here.
Right.
Do you experience a difference between Dutch audiences and other audiences?
It's interesting. I haven't really had the opportunity much to play for much different audiences. I think that's coming. But I think the nature of my work is also, it's not really focused on one identity. So it's universal. And so the audiences that I've encountered have been quite receptive in general to the work that I've produced. What I have noticed about Dutch audiences, the ones who, the planners, the ticket buyers, the ones who end up in the seats, the butts that end up in the seats, because that was in the agenda. Bless them, is that they are quite open to even messages of, that might be conflicting with their beliefs. Sometimes my poetry is also confronting in terms of shared histories. It's not divisive, because I feel like that's not really productive, because no one's going to a planet where there's only them and their preferred group. We're going to do it together. So it's always from that angle that I approach a topic that might be divisive. And I've noticed that the typical Dutch audience member doesn't really mind that. It's almost like the stage and the theater is their place for this. Like, is their place to be confronted with difference. Maybe it's won't be as easily accepted in the Albert Heijn. But if you are on stage in the Carré or Boom Chicago or wherever you may be, that's the place where they go to almost receive this sort of, not opposition, but controversial messages. They can take it there. So I appreciate that as a performer.
And what would you say are the messages that you get pushback on? Because you do speak about, cultural differences. It's not just similarities in communities, but you also speak about differences. I've also heard you in other interviews talk about issues like cultural appropriation before. And so are those any of the issues where you feel like you get pushback, or are there other issues that you get pushback?
I've never, it's interesting, like even though I've been dealing with quite controversial topics, I think one of the ways in which one of the places that I create from is very much sticking to my personal experience, because it's authentic to me to be othered, It's authentic to me to have experienced, to have viewed something as cultural appropriation. I'm often the one who has the authority to speak on that, because normally I'm in the margins as a African woman. So that at that intersection of being that, there's a lot of things that I can speak on in terms of marginalization that can't really be pushed back on, because it's my lived experience. And I think generally people have respected that. So I'm not sure how it will proliferate as more ears, as I also not progress, but as I move to wider audiences, or even more international audiences with different perspectives. I'm not sure how that will land, but I do know that I can always stand on my own authenticity and experience, and that enables me to trigger that process in other people, so that they can go on their own thought process journey of what their experiences have been. And those things can't really be challenged, because that's your truth.
Is that one of the benefits of being, someone who performs, poetry and spoken word and readings in this way? Do you maybe tend to attract a little bit more of an open-minded audience?
Probably, yeah. I've probably been in a safe space in terms of, I started my storytelling journey at the Mesrab, the storytelling house on the Oosterdok, where people from all different cultures come and tell their stories of being moved and moving and integrating, and this telling my story there is preaching to the choir. Yes.
I mean, the nature of the question is also because the Netherlands, but also other countries that have complex relationships with their past and their history. There seems to sometimes be a segment of the Netherlands that wants to overlook the harsh realities of some of its history. Such as celebrating the Dutch East Indies Company or the Dutch West Indies Company.
Absolutely.
The VOC and
absolutely,
and the colonial era, and kind of forget about the slave trade that also happened alongside of that, or the atrocities that took place in the lands where they existed. And sometimes just an acknowledgement of that history feels like a threat, I think, or it's interpreted as a threat when, other people might say, well, history is history. It is what it is. It doesn't, an acknowledgement of what happened 300 years ago doesn't negate what we see around us today.
Well, a perfect shining example would be the celebration of sail that we've just seen in Amsterdam.
The ships festival, the Tall Ships Festival.
Exactly. You know, seafaring has been part of is woven into the Dutch identity, from colonial times on the way to find spices, like, this, or not spices. I hate saying that because it's so one dimensional and we all know all the things that they actually traded in the end, but to find fortune, like, they went to find trade. So from colonial times all the way to now, like, having a boat that goes along the canals, or going on a lover's cruise along the canals. So, like, being on the water, the story of the Netherlands really is also a dialogue between human and water. And for this, you need a vessel, and the ships is just part of the history. That's a fact. But I think in sail, like, I think where there can be a slight is in the way you tell a story. And I think that also really is what makes me a storyteller, because there's many ways to tell a story. And one of them is to tell it by omission, like, to omit certain details that's actually core to the result. Like, for example, the result of sail now, hundreds of years later, it was a complete immersion in, like, Dutch maritime prowess and achievement. And, one of the first ships in the parade were these 17th century amazingly crafted vessels, that made really long, hard voyages. Like, no one can take that away from the human hands that came together to create those ships. At the same time, that's one side of the story. What I felt as a citizen from a former Dutch colony watching sail go by was not only acknowledgement of the human ingenuity that went into creating those ships, but it was also grief for all the things our indigenous people lost at the hands of those ships and their arrival on our indigenous shores. We lost languages. With colonialism, we lost our connection to the mountain, to the ocean. Those were our riches. Those were our trajectories of development, which were disrupted because of trade and, like, eventually human trafficking and extraction, the nature of the spirit of extraction that they came with, Lord. Going into preacher mode. Well, this is what they took, what those ships took from us, and in the present, all these hundreds of years later, it leaves us as descendants with a sense of grief when we see those ships. So I think, especially in a modern city like Amsterdam, now where so many nationalities gather, it's not just the descendants of Koning Willem-Alexander that is living here now. Like, we're all here. Like, that is the result of those journeys. I'm here now, and, like, that people from Suriname are here now, and Curaçao, and Indonesia, Malaysia. Like, we're all here. So I think in terms of storytelling, there is an opportunity to right a wrong, and to include the full story, and include the people that have been extracted into the narrative, and sort of repair a little bit of that extractive spirit by acknowledging the grief and just being sensitive to it. I mean, that is being in relationship, and that is integration, not just tolerance.
One issue that sometimes maybe causes one culture to gloss over its negative history or its negative past, is there possibly also a connection to the, this idea that generational trauma, it's a new concept, right? Or relatively speaking, a new concept that maybe people aren't very completely aware of yet.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a connection there. I mean, we are in the information age, and we are also a global village now. I think before, glossing over certain parts of history was easier just because of proximity and distance and, groups of people of all the same culture being in the same place, not so much foreigners, but it's different now. And that is sort of what they triggered when they crossed the seas. Like, for example, the slogan of Sail 2025 was United by Waves. And for better or worse, we were we're here now. And that means that in terms of proximity, we're closer together. So there's more to consider. That also explains, for example, how Zwarte Piet was allowed to proliferate for so many generations here. And it was only around 2011 when I arrived, and I also came as an au pair, for example. So I was in a family context with children who celebrated Sinterklaas, and only the conversation was then only starting, because of course I was like, oh, this is a bit strange. And they were like, no, like the chimney.
Well, so for people who don't know, the Sinterklaas tradition being, what Dutch families do in the Netherlands during the Christmas time, or in the run up to Christmas. And it's Sinterklaas is the Bishop of Turkey who arrives in the Netherlands by steamboat, and was previously, though this is, changed in recent years, which is what you're talking about, was joined by Zwarte Piet or Black Pete, who was his assistant, or many of his assistants who would help him in either handing out gifts or, as it used to be, kidnapping the bad children and taking them off to Spain on the way home. But what maybe people also don't know is how much more frequently people used to dress up in blackface and paint their faces in makeup, and and children as well, to dress up like this character, Zwarte Piet. And that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. So yeah, thanks for filling that in. So instead of elves, it was helpers in blackface, basically referring to slaves and colonial times. And during the 17th century, dark-skinned black slaves was an item of luxury almost, So I understand how in that time, this became the custom, or the celebration had these characters, because that was the time. But now, in this day and age, also from 2011 onwards, when I came, and the conversation wasn't even open yet about, there was no objection to this celebration. The conversation had just started, to where we are now in 2025, where, there's been so much activistic work and protests and discussions about it, that it's no longer appropriate to have this character of Black Pete, even in the Albert Heijn.
In the grocery stores.
In the grocery stores, you don't see this character anymore, because the people who are here now from former colonies, who come from a legacy of slavery at the hands of the Dutch, had to speak up, and not only speak up, but also endure harm and really fight for this character to no longer be in the place where now they call home, because this is home now for all of us. And so it's not sustainable to have a character like that. And I think that's what I mean with generational. I think that's a good illustration of generational trauma and grief in the face of this glossing over quote unquote violent pages in history. It doesn't marry well anymore, because the proximity of different peoples is now has increased, and you will encounter difference. And now your neighbor might be originally from Suriname or something like that. So I think now is the time where we unpack, because we are together. We were united by the waves.
A close friend of mine who is from Suriname and is Black and moved here. Well, he'd been here once before, but he moved here, I think, around the same time that you did. And he is older. Older than you are. He's in his mid-50s. And when he used to get into conversations with white people about the issue, he would sometimes have to point out to them that he's only the second generation in his family to be a free person.
Exactly.
that just, his great grandmother had started her life as an enslaved person
Exactly.
and had to get her freedom. And perhaps some people also don't feel exactly how close that history is to now.
Exactly. It's not that far away, And I think for the Netherlands also, like, a lot of this nature of going away, and so it's and pardon the language, it's like you don't shit where you eat, like, they were really good at that, because all the violence and the conflicts and the things was like in Indonesia, in South Africa, and then they brought home the spoils, and then they built Amsterdam, and now it's the safe haven, and it's been so developed over all these centuries. And I feel like it's good that we are all allowed to be here, and it's correct also that me, as somebody from a former colony, gets to also be home here and enjoy a part of its development and the safety that I have here as a woman. Like, for example, in Cape Town, I cannot just walk anywhere as a woman at night, for example, but because of all the development and safety and all the consequence here in this city, I can. So there's space for me to develop my identity. There's space for me to express. There's even space for me to criticize. So I feel like this is great, and as it should be. United by waves.
I know also, you brought a poem with you as well.
Yes.
What are the themes that this poem touches on?
This poem is called Forward, and like a preface to a book or to a story. And writing this poem taught me the legacy that I'm a part of as a South African-born poet. And it allowed me to investigate what the function of poetry is in this day and age. Because often poetry is seen as an antiquated practice that's largely confectionery these days. It's a Valentine's poem. It's it's somebody who's like a intellectual or buff or something. But it didn't start like that. Poetry was one of the first newspapers, and one of the first ways to interact with collective truth. And now, of course, we have the media and all these things that are so loud. But I think in this day and age, there is a place for poetry to resume its function. And this poem really drops my pin in that legacy of poetry being functional.
There was a long-running TV show here. I think it's De Wereld Draait Door. The world keeps spinning.
Day by day. Yes, I remember.
Which if memory serves, that aside from having a panel of guests that would talk about, often humorously, the events that were going on that week or during the day, they also had a house poet that would close the show with a poem about
summing it up.
A wrap up. Exactly.
Yes, I remember that. Funny.
So maybe you're bringing that tradition back. The show's been off the air for just a few years, but maybe this is the way things need to go.
Yeah, I'm certainly part of a movement. Like, I'm not alone. There are so many voices coming up, and young people as well, young poets sharing what they feel about the current news. So let me.
If you'd share it, that would be lovely.
Thank you. Forward. This is how we rebuild. Sit with me and take a look at our world. Our cities sectioned in grids, twinkling lights marking stop signs, tram lines, and neon ads selling you your feelings. Speaking in the languages you dream in, each word conveying meaning we all agreed to. Drink the new iced tea. Keep your eyes on me. Tell me what you see. I'm Julia Beth. Poetry is my inheritance. As one of the first generations to grow up in post-apartheid South Africa, I reaped the benefits of the resistance movements that came before me. The poets of the time breathed new life into new worlds, and during turbulent times is when poets emerge. In our world of inflated truth, is there truly a platform that delivers the news with an unbiased view that points to the power in you? The things that only in the quiet you know to be true. But what can our human words do? How have they been used? From the grandmother telling stories with young ears at her feet, to the ancient truth teller in the square sharing news in the street. What is it that we now need? What if you tuned out from distraction, cultivated your imagination, and treated your every word as a seed? This is how we rebuild. Sit with me and take a look at our world. When poetry comes to me, I feel like a bridge between what was and what will be, between the oneness and fragmented society. It comes quietly. When I sit and listen to the voice beyond my voice. In writing, I make a choice to see us here, tuning into quiet revolutions, reviewing the powers that be. This poetry is not a luxury. It is a tool. A call to action through feeling, a mode of collective healing, through kneeling at the altar within, as spoken in the beginning. These words are a ceremony, an induction to your sovereignty, a pathway to the solidarity that moves us forward.
That's amazing. That was so lovely.
Thank you.
I felt, is there something in that makes you emotional when you read it? Because I felt as you were reading the beginning of that, it seemed like you were either nerves maybe, or just the emotion of your writing was kind of a part of you in that moment.
What did you feel in that moment?
I felt someone who was being open and honest with somebody that they've barely met before.
You felt honesty.
Yeah.
You felt authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
a rawness.
Yeah.
Yes. I think, that's the space that I go to, that I dive into in order to help people travel to that place inside themselves. And that's why I asked, what did you feel? Because if you felt that, then it's an exchange. Because then we both felt it. Then it's a journey that we made together. So if you felt nerves, it's because I let you see my nerves. If you felt rawness, it's because I opened that space for us. And I think that's my job, is to go to that place in myself to enable people to visit that in themselves as well, to link people to their own agency and vulnerability.
Obviously, over time, you've developed as a writer over the last 15 years, but how did you get to this place of development as a performer? It seems you had such a clear understanding of where to emphasize different words in what you were reading, and what degree of enunciation to use as you were reading it, and to not be, let's say, I don't feel as though you overemphasized anything or made it showy in that way. So how have you developed as a performer? How did that happen?
Oh, what a good question. It was a journey. It's funny, I listen now to the recordings of my first performances, and I think, much like with singing, like using your voice is, there's no hiding. Like, and I could hear where I was at in those early recordings with sharing my voice, but also sharing my message, feeling comfortable in my truth. And it's been a journey of just continuing to confront that feeling, like, allowing my voice to shake, allowing my accent to come through, allowing my difference, allowing my nerves for the sake of getting the words out and coming here and sharing what I came here to share. That is where my fulfillment lies at the end. So it's worth it to make the journey through my to my authenticity. So it came with practice. It came with just continuing to say yes to speaking in front of people, and also realizing that it's not before every reading or every sharing, realizing that it's not me. It's not actually about me. It's not about me being seen. It's about me holding up a mirror to the world and channeling something and allowing people to see and be seen. It's an exchange. I'm there to serve in that moment. So it helps me that this thought process has helped me to continue to practice my voice, to be there as a servant.
Holding up a mirror is an interesting choice of words.
What?
Holding up a mirror is an interesting
Yes.
choice of words. And it's also something that's come out in other work of yours as well. I'm thinking of it's a poem called Blood from a Stone.
Oh, yes.
That you wrote.
Yes,
and
wonderful.
Now, just to preface it, it's, the poem is from the is about a man who is, religious and having a dialogue with God in that moment of wanting to, about the difficulties of life as being an honest person, and perhaps wanting to come back or give it another go as someone who, can use lying and manipulating to try to make life a little easier for them.
Right.
And identifying as an evangelical Christian in that poem as well. And being told that they can do this, they can take this path, and this man can take that journey, but he'll be given the challenge of having a daughter who will be a reflection on him and hold up a mirror to him.
That's right.
And which, I don't want to make an assumption. So is that poem, Blood from a Stone, is that about your father? And is that about you as the daughter in that story?
I mean, it's definitely like autofiction, like it's autobiographical to a degree, but it's also me taking creative liberties. That's my, it's from the way I see it. And it is inspired by the relationship between myself and my father, and certain feelings that I felt opposite him. But of course, he is the holder of his story, and how, the way he chooses to live his life, that is his jurisdiction, But as his daughter, and I mean, you are a father with daughters too, and I don't have any children, but I imagine if they do come, there'll be a mirror too.
Mm-hmm.
Reflecting back to you what is between you. And I think having that role, like, as a daughter, also definitely informs what I do for an audience. Like, in terms of art and the function of art, what it's here for, it's not really there to change the world per se. It's not going to. But the function of art is to hold up a mirror and say, like, hey, this is happening in the emotional realm. Like, hey, to point to things, to reflect society, to reflect the times. That's one interpretation of the function of art. And I'm a part of that with my poetry. I'm just saying, I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm saying, hey, this is being felt by many. Hey, this is how I feel, and this is making connections. It's a different way of reporting the news. The news is also not really solving any problems, like the format of a news station. They're not saying, oh, this is happening in Gaza and this is how to fix it. They're saying, this is happening in Gaza and this is happening in South Africa and this is happening there. And even then they have their lens.
And here's Tom with the weather.
Yes,
right?
and here's Tom with, exactly. Thank you for that punchline. And here's Tom with the weather. These are things that are happening, and I'm also reporting the weather, but I'm reporting mental and emotional fronts and sort of mental weather and emotional currents.
What you're saying,
people make of it what they want.
Yeah, this reminds me. Just a week ago, I had the opportunity to meet and interview the director Steve McQueen.
Oh, wonderful!
Who's actually based here in Amsterdam and won an Oscar for 12 Years a Slave.
Yes,
and has a documentary that he put out a couple of years ago based on the Bianca Stichter's historical work. She's a writer and filmmaker who has done extensive research on Amsterdam, especially during the World War II era. And the two of them are married. And his documentary is based on her work, where he shoots 1 minute scenes of basically every location that's in her book, over 2,000 of them. And presents what's happening at that location today, juxtaposed against the words of what happened at this scene in 1940 through 1945. There's a 4.5 hour long version of the documentary. That's the short version of the documentary. And then there's a 34 hour long version, which is running on a loop.
An artwork.
At the Rijksmuseum, the National Gallery.
Oh, I can't wait to go and see it.
So there's a silent version that's showing on the screens outside of the museum and inside the museum.
Oh, how nice to bring it to the people like that.
Yeah, and inside you can go and listen to the words of history, against the video. And when asking him about it, he describes the silent version outside of the museum, where all you see are a collection of scenes of Amsterdam today in the present. The idea being that art is modern and contemporary. And in this case, it's a work that shows the complexity of the city, where over time and over 80 years, that maybe you'd walk around these neighborhoods and have no idea what had happened there 80 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago.
Absolutely.
And the city being 750 years old, you have to you can either take it for what it is, which is the video outside of the museum, or you can go and listen to the words that are being spoken inside the museum and understand just how layered Amsterdam is. And he's described himself in that same way as being, the purpose of art is modernity. It's to show, the contemporary and what's happening now. And he described it as being just like a Rembrandt or a Vermeer.
Absolutely.
That when those paintings came out, it was just, that's what's happening in this moment. And you have to find out who commissioned the work, who the person is in the painting, what the symbolism is. And each moment that you go a little bit further, you can go in a little bit more.
Absolutely. The context around it, that is what there are multiple stories that pour out when you understand the context. And in that way, these paintings, they are eternal. That's like every now and then I like to go to and see Van Gogh's paintings, And we have the privilege of the museum plane, and a
Mhm.
museum card if you're lucky. Yeah. And, to even to go and visit the paintings at the Rijksmuseum, they're timeless because, of course, they were a snapshot of the time, but there's also the intention of the artist, which is very much still alive in today in terms of the choices that they made, like where they chose to have the light fall, why they chose to have it fall there. Like I went to the Scheepvaartsmuseum in research for Where the Clouds Gather, and there was this massive painting of one of the seafaring admirals, and he was there, like, with velvet drapes as a backdrop, like in full regalia, like a dark-skinned black slave at his side, like a globe of the world, like a skeleton at the bottom, like just a rich painting, which at the time he must have thought was flattering. But years and years later, how it's aged, you can also see the choices that the painter made in the smirk of the slave who was at his feet. Now that we all know that what has happened, or what these seafaring voyages were about, you can see the expression of the slave, and even the expression of the dog that they painted at his feet. You can see what was happening at the time, and actually the opinion or the expression of the artist, who probably didn't agree with what was happening. I don't know, but that's what I made out of it. But there are multiple layers of history in an artwork or a snapshot of a time that resonates for as long as the work is witnessable.
Is it, this level of observation which has driven you as a writer?
I'm an observer first.
Yeah, is that how you would describe yourself?
Yes, it's. I think also that's one of the first lines on my about page on my website. It's. I was also where that comes from is that I'm the youngest of a family, and my mother had 3 girls, and I'm the youngest of those girls. And I think as the youngest, you're the last one in line, so that position gives you a view of everyone who came before, and you have an overview of the whole theater of a family. And that's what really shaped me into an observer, was watching these characters that inspired so much of my own identity flit in and out of the house. They were my first celebrities and the first people I wrote about and processed to this level of observation. So I'm definitely an observer first.
Would they be, are they surprised with, your direction and your path and what you've chosen?
I don't know, really. I think for one sister, it's quite clear. I think she always saw this way with words in me. And I think for the rest, in being the youngest, there's also a big generation gap. And I think they're just busy with their own problems, to be honest, to think about this poetry business I'm doing. So to a large degree, some of them can't really relate to this choice. And I think it is also a choice that not many people make. So I think they're happy if I'm happy, but are not really relating and having like colorful opinions about it. They're just like, okay, good luck. But when I see pictures, when I see photographs of when I was a child and old family photographs, I can see me there already. And I think I was always, I came like this. Born this way.
What would have it been had you not moved here? Do you think you still would have gone down this road and found a life in poetry and literature and spoken word and performance?
You know what? I may have. I think so. I think I would have. I think so, because there's a legacy of South African resistance poetry, and there are many poets there. Like, apartheid is only, it's, 30 plus years since apartheid is abolished. So I think after a people goes through something like that, like the poem says, that is when poets emerge, because there's a lot to reflect on. There's many perspectives to represent. So I think I'm part of a movement. And if I was in context in South Africa, I may have written different poems because wouldn't have had the friction of and this longing that we spoke of and all these contrasts. I think moving to the other side of the world accelerated my craft, but also sharpened my point of view because now it was informed by these contrasts. And I think I may have been a different poet, but I came with these words, and I think my mother wrote too. And I think I would have always found this if I stayed true.
All right, I'm gonna leave it there. And if people want to find you, and of course, you've got this performance that's coming up as part of the Spirit of Amsterdam at the end of November.
Yes.
But how can people find you, and where can they find out how to buy tickets for your performances?
Yes. So I communicate on my Instagram, and that's Julia_Beth_ Harris. That's where you can find me. It's the one part where I didn't bother to imagine. It's like, this is it. So that's my handle on Instagram, and that's where I share about in preparation for the show in November, which is part of the Spirit of Amsterdam Festival. Tickets will go live for that closer to the time. So please watch the space for the tickets going live. But in the meantime, I will communicate and practice my material at open mics around the city. And I will share that on my Instagram as well. So that's where you can find me. Okay.
Well, Julia Beth, or JB, as you told me to call you earlier, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really interesting and amazing. And thank you for sharing the poem forward with us. It was really a treat to be able to experience it just in this setting so close to you, and to hear you share these words with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and for creating this platform where we can voice our stories.
Dam Yankee is produced in partnership with NL Times, the top choice for English language news from the Netherlands. Founded nearly 15 years ago, NL Times is now the #1 site for information about this country, featuring more news stories every day of the week than any other website. Keep tabs on the latest top stories, features, and breaking news from across the entire country, including the 3 big cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague. So visit nltimes.nl now and find out what millions of people are reading about the Netherlands. Dam Yankee is an NL Times podcast. The show was created by me and Pete Rizzo. Marcus Engel edited this episode.